She didn't scream when she saw them. She didn't cry, didn't confront, didn't even make a sound. Because in that exact moment, standing in the doorway of her own bedroom, watching her husband and her best friend betray her in the most intimate way possible, something inside her didn't break. It sharpened. And from that silence, a plan was born, one so calculated, so patient, that by the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. This is the story of a woman who lost everything in a single night, and chose not to fight back immediately, but to disappear in plain sight and take back her entire world piece by piece. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Evelyn Carter, a self-made billionaire known for her precision, discipline, and the kind of intelligence that made people underestimate her at their own risk. She didn't inherit her wealth. She built it from nothing, turning a small tech consulting firm into a multi-billion-dollar empire before the age of 40. People admired her, feared her, and envied her, but very few truly knew her. The only two people she trusted without hesitation were her husband, Daniel Hayes, and her lifelong best friend, Laura Bennett. Daniel was charming, polished, the kind of man who knew exactly what to say in every room. Laura was warm, loyal, or at least that's what Evelyn believed for over a decade. They weren't just part of her life, they were her life. The night everything changed wasn't supposed to be significant. Evelyn had returned early from a business trip, a deal closing faster than expected. She didn't call ahead. She wanted to surprise Daniel. Instead, she found herself standing outside her bedroom door, hearing laughter that didn't belong to her. It was soft at first, then unmistakable. And when she opened that door, what she saw erased years of trust in seconds. But instead of reacting the way anyone would expect, Evelyn stepped back quietly, closed the door without a sound, and walked away. That decision, to say nothing, was the most important move she would make. The next morning, she sat across from Daniel at breakfast, calm, composed, her expression unreadable. She spoke normally, asked about his day, even smiled. Later that afternoon, she called Laura and invited her over for coffee. If there was any guilt in Laura's voice, it didn't show. Evelyn watched her carefully, studying every movement, every word, as if seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, she understood something critical. They believed they had gotten away with it. That belief would become her greatest advantage. A week later, Evelyn announced something that shocked everyone around her. She had been in a minor car accident while traveling, she said, and the damage to her vision was severe. Temporary, the doctors claimed, but uncertain. She could barely see shapes, she explained, her world reduced to shadows and light. The news spread quickly, drawing sympathy from colleagues, concern from friends, and careful, calculated reactions from the two people who mattered most. Daniel stepped into the role of the supportive husband almost too perfectly. Laura became even more present, offering help, checking in constantly. They played their parts well, but what they didn't realize was that Evelyn could see everything. The diagnosis was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion designed to make her invisible in her own life. Because when people believe you're weak, they stop hiding who they really are. And that's exactly what happened. Conversations that once would have been guarded became careless. Phone calls were taken in the same room. Messages were left open. Daniel began making decisions about the company without consulting her, assuming she was no longer capable. Laura grew more comfortable, more confident, stepping into spaces she never would have dared to before. And Evelyn observed all of it in silence. What they didn't know was that Evelyn had always been 10 steps ahead of everyone in business, and now she was applying that same strategy to her personal life. She reviewed every financial record, every shared asset, every legal document tied to her marriage and her company. Quietly, she began restructuring everything. Accounts were moved, ownerships were adjusted, and clauses buried deep in contracts were activated. She didn't rush. Every move was deliberate, designed to build toward something final. At the same time, she expanded her surveillance, not in obvious ways but through systems already embedded in her home and offices. Security feeds, access logs, digital footprints. She didn't need to follow them. They were walking straight into her field of vision every single day. And the more comfortable they became, the more they revealed. Late-night meetings that weren't about business. Private conversations filled with plans for a future that didn't include her. Even discussions about how to eventually remove her from control of her own company, under the assumption that her condition would make it easy. But Evelyn didn't react, not yet, because revenge to her wasn't about emotion, it was about timing. Months passed, and from the outside, it looked like Evelyn Carter was fatting. She attended fewer meetings, relied more on Daniel in public, and allowed Laura to become a constant presence in her life. Investors began to shift their trust. Board members started looking to Daniel for leadership. It was exactly the narrative Evelyn wanted them to believe, because while they were watching her step back, she was quietly pulling every string that held their world together. The final stage of her plan began with an event, an annual corporate gala, one of the most important nights for her company. It was the kind of setting where appearances mattered, where reputations were built or destroyed in a single evening. Daniel saw it as his moment to step fully into power. Laura saw it as the beginning of a new life, and Evelyn saw it as the perfect stage. That night the room was filled with the most influential people in the industry. Investors, partners, media. All eyes were on Daniel as he took the stage, confident, composed, ready to present himself as the future of the company. Evelyn sat at the front, still playing her role, her gaze distant, her presence almost overlooked, until everything changed. Because just as Daniel began to speak, the screens behind him lit up, not with the presentation he had prepared, but with something else entirely. Private messages, recorded conversations, financial transactions. Every piece of evidence Evelyn had collected over months of silence was now displayed in front of everyone who mattered. The room went still. Daniel froze. Laura's face drained of color. And for the first time since that night, Evelyn stood up. When she spoke, her voice was calm, steady, impossible to ignore. She revealed the truth, not just about the betrayal, but about the attempts to take control of her company, the manipulation, the lies. And then, with a clarity that left no room for doubt, she made one final revelation. She was never blind, not for a single second. What followed wasn't chaos. It was collapse. Contracts were terminated. Legal actions were initiated. Assets that Daniel believed were his were already gone. Laura's access to anything tied to Evelyn's world had been erased long before that night. In a matter of minutes, everything they had tried to build behind her back disappeared. And as the room watched their downfall unfold, Evelyn Carter did something no one expected. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She looked finished, as if the story had already ended for her long before this moment, and this was simply the closing scene. Because in the end, the most powerful move she made wasn't exposing them. It was letting them believe they had won, until there was nothing left for them to take.